Listen, Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers aren't enough to win you football games anymore. Maybe Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson are the new way to win a football game. We're going to get into that, the new era in the NFL, and also the NBA. There's some talk around that in this episode, and a little bit on the Nets and their disaster of a PR situation. We'll get into all of that in today's episode of Lots of Thoughts, a sports podcast. Without further ado, let's get into it. I want to first thank each and every one of you listening. This podcast would not be running without your support, and I really appreciate it. If you're interested in more of Lots of Thoughts, a sports podcast content, or Lots of Thoughts sports content, all the links are in the description, but you can follow us on Instagram at Lots of Thoughts Sports, on TikTok at Lots of Thoughts Sports, on YouTube. Now our handle is live at Lots of Thoughts Sports, so you can type in youtube.com/ at Lots of Thoughts Sports. If you're listening on an audio platform. Alternatively, if you're listening on a video platform, we're also available on wherever you get your podcast. You can visit our website, lotsofthoughts.godaddysites.com. There you can access the podcast, the newsletter, the YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of which are live on the website. The merchandise, forgot to mention that, most of which are available via the links below, but the website will get you to all of those easily and quickly. There's a new era in sports, and I want to get into that in both the context of the NFL and the NBA, but I want to address the Nets situation because of the recent updates and really the high profile names that are involved in this cluster cuss, if you will. So first of all, the Kyrie Irving situation. I want to take you back before that, actually. Let's go back to when this offseason, occurred, and we had Kevin Durant requesting a trade from Brooklyn, requesting that Steve Nash, after being told he wasn't being traded, then requesting Steve Nash and Sean Marks be fired, or he would, still want to be traded. And at the time, I thought, this is great. I'm not a Steve Nash guy. Let me start from that. I love him as a person. He's an absolutely spectacular human being. He, you can tell he's a great family man. He spends a lot of time philanthropically. He seems like a really cool dude, down to earth, really genuine person. But he was not ready to be a head coach in the NBA. Nevertheless, a head coach of a situation that was so strenuous. There's two parts to being a head coach. There's the X's and O's. Let me say this. There's two parts to being a head coach in the NBA today. There's the X's and O's, and there's the balancing on egos. And some teams require more of one than the other, right? Teams with heavy star power, like the Nets had in KD, Kyrie, and James Harden, need more of a balancing of egos because those three offensive, threats are going to make your job a lot easier as a head coach from the X's and O's perspective. And that's what we saw in the first year. Nash, granted, had great assistants as well. Jacques Vaughn, of course, who's now the interim head coach. Mike D'Antoni was an assistant, longtime head coach, of course, of the Suns, of the Rockets, of other teams, and Ime Udoka, who is going to come up later in the storyline, but went on to have a very good year with the Boston Celtics. He had a whole host of assistant coaches that were more than qualified to be in their positions, and the offense hummed when the big three were on the court. Defense was enough, and there were no crazy amounts of offensive scheming that needed to be done. It was mostly talent that won out. And all of a sudden, then the next year happened when Kyrie's vaccination situation happened, when Harden wasn't playing as well as he could have been, whether it be due to injury or due to personal will. When KD got hurt, there was various circumstances that required a better X's and O's coach than Steve Nash was ready for. And even after that, he wasn't ready to manage the egos either. It was clear that, frankly, they didn't like him. They, they showed like they did at first, and James Harden described Steve Nash as his, thought twin, where they were thinking the same all the time. But it's clear they began to grow sour of Steve Nash. So if you're not good at being an X's and O's coach, you're not good at being an ego negotiator, then you're not a head coach in this league, especially of a team that's ready to compete for a championship this year. They should have fired Steve Nash in the offseason when Kevin Durant requested it. It was an easy bridge. Joe Tsai could have said, okay, KD, I see that you want Sean Marks and Steve Nash fired. Let me meet you in the middle. We'll get rid of Steve Nash. We'll hire a coach that's more, adept when it comes to scheming based on less talent. So that way, when you have a day off, we're not, struggling to find offense. Instead, Joe Tsai stuck to his grounds, which, you could give him some credit for. But Steve Nash was kept around for a whopping 7 games before he was let go. And I thought it'd be later in the season, but I knew Steve Nash was going to eventually go, and that needed to be done. And then a whole other storyline of this is the Kyrie Irving situation. For those unfamiliar, he posted a link to a movie that has very anti-Semitic themes throughout it. I'm not going to go into the full details of what it means for the Jewish community, but there's a big Jewish community in Brooklyn, and they were very hurt by it. Of course, the Jewish community around the world was hurt by it, and he's very much doubled down. Do I think that this is the end of the world? No. But is it something that's absolutely horrible and needs to be addressed? Yes. I've been a defender of Kyrie Irving through the thick and thin. I was, I was backing him when he was a flat earther because I knew that he wasn't really a flat earther. I understood his thought about the vaccine, even though I didn't agree with the position. I think that most of the things he says are mishandled by the media in a very aggressive manner because they don't like him, and he doesn't like them in many ways. And I think he's genuinely a good person, even after putting this out there. I think he's just horribly misinformed. And, maybe someone who is Jewish would be more qualified to talk on this and talk on what the movie means to them and how, the posting of it really damaged their view of Kyrie. But this is not something you can stand by and, support without being a racist yourself, in my opinion. So Kyrie has to address this, and Steve Nash clearly avoided addressing it to the media. Kyrie is now not being available to the media, and now Steve Nash has been fired. So Jacques Vaughn takes over in the meantime, but the Nets are making it somewhat clear that Jacques Vaughn's not the head coach long-term or even for the rest of the season. They're looking to hire someone from outside the organization, and rumor has it that's Ime Udoka, who was suspended from a year from the Celtics after leading them to the finals for having inappropriate relations with a female staff member. If that's the case, that's a huge, huge step up for the Nets in terms of a coaching X's and O's perspective, and it's probably a huge step up in terms of the managing of egos perspective. But it's also a huge step up in the drama perspective. We have the whole situation with KD I mentioned. We didn't even talk about James Harden being traded for Ben Simmons and him not playing, and now him having a whole nother injury. That's like 4th on the storyline list, which is incredible. And then you have the Kyrie situation, and now all of a sudden we're adding someone who had inappropriate relations with the female staffer as a new head coach part of the way through the season. If this works, it's incredible. If this doesn't work, it's an absolute dumpster fire. And as a Nets fan, that terrifies me and it excites me at the same time, and I'm ready for it. On to the actual content of this episode. I think that there's a certain change in the NFL, and I'm pulling up the standings here. If you see me looking to the side, that's just purely because I'd like to see where the teams lay out for the purpose of this conversation. But there was an era, maybe 10 years ago, where the best quarterbacks won you football games. You knew the Saints were always going to be good because of Drew Brees. You knew the Chargers, well, they wasted Phillip Rivers, but they were going to be competent with Phillip Rivers. You knew the Steelers were going to be good with Ben Roethlisberger. You knew the Patriots were going to be good with Tom Brady. The Packers with Brett Favre, and then later Aaron Rodgers. There are teams that have this consistent quarterback play. The Colts, and then later the Broncos with Peyton Manning. The Giants with Eli Manning. There are teams that had these franchise quarterbacks that you knew you could depend on to lead competent teams into the future. Even to the extent of guys like Matt Ryan in Atlanta or Russell Wilson in Seattle. That's a key one. You believed in them and in their talent enough that you believed in the team around them because of it. And I think we're seeing a complete change of guard in the NFL. Most of those guys I mentioned are retired, right? Eli Manning's gone. Matt Ryan's about to be retired from Indianapolis. He might as well be. Drew Brees is gone. Ben Roethlisberger's gone. Phillip Rivers is gone. Peyton Manning's gone. Eli Manning's gone. There's this new regime of quarterbacks that are coming in. But the guys that are still here, you kind of relied upon to get you a win when you needed it. Aaron Rodgers seemed bulletproof. Tom Brady seemed like he was never aging. And, conversation about his family situation aside, Tom Brady probably shouldn't have come back to play football from an X's and O's perspective. Same with Aaron Rodgers. I think both of them might have wished that they would have retired last year and might be considering retiring in the near future. In the same way, New England isn't the same powerhouse they were thought to be. It was always even after Tom Brady left, it was always Bill Belichick will carry them through. They'll be a really good playoff team, and that's not happening. They're a decent team. They're 4-4, but they're also last place in the division. There's a new regime in the NFL, and it starts with the quarterback position. The best quarterbacks in the league are not Aaron Rodgers, not Russell Wilson, not Tom Brady. I didn't mention Russell Wilson with Rodgers and Brady, but Russell Wilson looks awful. I've talked about the Broncos in the past. There's a previous episode about the NFL Week 2 roundup, if you want to go back and listen to it, where I discussed the full issues with the Russell Wilson trade in the first place, Nathaniel Hackett and all the like. Those guys aren't going to get you wins where you thought they would. And the quarterbacks that are this new wave. They're no longer the pocket passers. They're no longer the big arms and ultra, I shouldn't say ultra mentally focused, because the new quarterbacks are, but I want to say that the old quarterbacks were fantastic players and the new quarterbacks are fantastic athletes, right? Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, these guys are Lamar Jackson. They're prototypical athletes that are great at throwing the football. Tua Tagovailoa, even to that extent. These guys are freakishly athletic, can escape each and every one of them that I just mentioned, maybe aside from Tua, can escape the pocket, can make plays with their legs. But if you need a big throw, they're absolutely incredibly talented with that, with no matter the weapons. I mean, guys like Stephon Diggs certainly elevated the play of Josh Allen, and Travis Kelce certainly helps Patrick Mahomes, right? You see Lamar Jackson struggling even with Mark Andrews to have a consistent set of weapons. But when you have a talent that takes that next step, the team is winning because of them. Whereas if you have a quarterback a la these older talents like Rodgers or Brady or Russell Wilson, the team ends up winning in spite of them. And you see that with Denver's the best example of that. Every single win they've had is, gutty, defensive minded, running the ball. Eventually the other team will make a mistake, and that's how you win the game. And that's not what Denver expected to be. They expected to be a high flying offense with a really talented defense. Broncos country, let's ride wasn't, Broncos country, let's stop them on fourth down. That's not the mission statement of the Denver Broncos. But I don't want to go, like I said, if you want more Denver Broncos talk, I've talked about in a previous episode. I don't want to lay in them too much. We're seeing a new era in the NFL that I think is directly mirrored in the NBA, or at least it could be. We're very early in the season, right? We're between 6 and 8 games or so, depending on the team, into the season. And there's certainly some surprises, right? Utah is not as bad as they look, although I still think they're going to be near the bottom of the league. But these stars, that was just a random tangent on Utah, but I'll get back to it. The stars of yesterday are not able to carry their team like they were able to yesterday. LeBron James is not going to resurrect the Los Angeles Lakers by himself. He needs Anthony Davis to be a top 5 NBA player and Russell Westbrook to be an all-star caliber player for this team to be a contender. Gone are the days of 2018 when LeBron can carry the Cavs to the finals against the Warriors, when his third best player might have been George Hill. Like, we look back on that, George Hill is like the 9th man on Milwaukee, who's probably going to make the finals, right? They're the best team in the East, I think. And he's probably the third best player. I mean, Kevin Love was, I'd say, their second best, but I mean, who else are you putting up there? J.R. Smith, Rodney Hood, Tristan Thompson. I don't know. I mean, maybe there's someone else I don't consider to be as good, or I'm missing. but LeBron carried a team of a lot of nobodies. Early career Jordan Clarkson and Larry Nance Jr., I guess, if you want to just go by name value. But LeBron carried a team of guys that weren't expected to be there to the finals, and he's not doing that with the Lakers this year. The Kevin Durant-led Brooklyn Nets, they're 2-6. As I'm recording this, they just lost to the Chicago Bulls, and I've talked all about their drama, but KD can get you 50 points and you still lose a game because you need more than Kevin Durant, no matter how good he is. This Philadelphia 76ers, they have immense top-heavy talent. Joel Embiid, James Harden, Tyrese Maxey, they're 4-4. Who else was I going to talk about? Miami Heat. There was, just like the Patriots, there's always a narrative. Jimmy Butler. Eric Spoelstra is going to field a team that makes the playoffs, and they're 3-5. And this is not to say that any of these teams couldn't turn it around, because they definitely can. I mean, teams like the Warriors being 3-5, I was going to mention them. Steph isn't carrying them to the playoffs. He's going to carry them to the playoffs. Let's just make that clear. I'm not worried about teams with competent head coaches and enough depth and talent to make it work that are just playing lackadaisically, like the Warriors are, like the Clippers are, for example, with their, resting guys every other day. It's the teams that have that star and not that much depth, whose eighth guy, maybe Yuta Watanabe, or maybe, I don't even know where to go. Troy Brown Jr. It's teams like this that don't have the depth to carry their top end talent. And I think that's a change in the NBA we're seeing, where the top end talent isn't enough. You need the top end talent combined with the depth, combined with a good head coach to really make that work. There's really two giant shifts in the way these sports operate. I think baseball doesn't have the same problem. I think the teams that are traditionally good, I mean, there's an analytics wave that's coming through, but it's not like it's flipping the league on its head as much as the other two sports. And it's been fun to watch so far. I like the idea of new and complete teams. I don't love watching teams that have one guy that carries you all the way. I think it's more fun to watch teams that are more complete and kill you death by 1,000 cuts. But it'll be interesting to see as the NBA season goes through and as the NFL finishes their second half of the season, if these, these themes continue to play out throughout the rest of the season and into the playoffs. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode of Lots of Thoughts, a sports podcast. If you enjoyed the content, click the links in the description, whether you're watching on YouTube or you're viewing on a podcast app. There's links to all our content across all our platforms. If you are listening on a podcast app, feel free to rate us 5 stars and subscribe, tell your friends. And if you're on YouTube, click the subscribe button down below and the little bell. It'll notify you whenever we release a new video on the channel. And if you really enjoyed it, please click the like button. It really works well with the YouTube algorithm of suggesting the videos for new potential listeners. And that's what we want to do. We want to grow the Lots of Thoughts sports community. Thank you very much for watching this episode of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed, and please have a wonderful rest of your day.